Hello guys, and welcome to a rather special episode of SPOCK the Week. As you can clearly see, for the first time since we started, we're all in the same room.
Yay, humans!
And as you can also see, we are still following social distancing rules by keeping so far apart. This is a bittersweet moment, sweet for me because I can still insult these two, and I'm far enough away for them not to hurt me. And the bitter bit is they can't hurt me. So guys, Gregor, Sarah joining us again on SPOCK the Week. Have you not got your own show to deal with? Hijacking ours again?
There does seem to be quite a number of people who fancy the idea of being marooned on Ceti Alpha 5, but not surprising given the circumstances on planet Earth right now. So yeah, but we're getting through the candidates for that.
So we're going to have, by the time this airs, there'll be at least another couple of episodes on there, and like I say, anybody's welcome to come and join. You just need to get in touch with us, the details of which will be at the end of the programme, as well as our Twitter handles and stuff like that, and contact details. So if you want to be marooned on Ceti Alpha 5, by all means join us. And Gregor, yes, thank you for inviting me round. You could have picked anybody to be your extended household, and it's me. I am honoured.
Yeah, you could have said no.
Yes, I could have. Yeah.
You could have said no, but you didn't. So that's us now lumped with you for weeks.
Yeah, we were kind of asking to be polite. We didn't expect you to say yes. So this is slightly awkward for us. However.
But yeah, no, it really is good. We've enjoyed doing the SPOCK the Week episodes and the Marooned on Ceti Alpha 5 episodes as well. And through the wonder of technology that is Zoom and the internet in general, we've been able to do that. But we're so happy to be able to do it in person. It brings you a better quality of video and a better quality of dynamics because it's here, it's live. There's no buff.
Android's malfunctioning.
It's still on mute! It's still on mute!
Is this thing on? It's so what you guys let's talk about it. We've not talked about it too much. Let's have a little chat up about how this has all been affecting both our Star Trek lives and also our social lives and stuff like that. So I don't think it's affected Gregor and Sarah's social life because I've seen their recycle bin. It's not pretty, guys. It's it's full, and
that's us propping up the economy.
Yes, you've been doing your bit for the economy. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great way.
And stress relief as well, because we've both still been working through the whole of this process.
Yeah. You both have been working through all this. For the big chunk of it, I wasn't, but I have gone back to work recently. And yeah, it's a big adjustment for me. I don't suppose it's you guys have had adjustments to go through as well. But yeah, it's a big adjustment from sitting around scratching my backside all day, playing with baby Neelix. Yes, that's my soon-to-be 2-year-old son. It's been great in that respect, but it's taken some getting used to going back to work as well. But the good thing is, being Star Trek fans, we have a lot of content to keep us occupied and keep us entertained through all this. One of the things we're going to be talking about in this episode is we're going to be talking about the movies. It was an idea we had over a conversation about what we were going to do for future episodes, and we thought, well, why don't we go to the movies? Why don't we talk about the Star Trek films from the beginning and just generally talk about them, what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and like I say, maybe Sarah will give us a few sort of little factoids that she may know. If you see her scuttling off underneath the table, she's going to check Memory Alpha to give us a few more. But yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to start from the beginning, work our way through. Eventually we're going to get to the Abrams films, or Jar Jar Trek as Gregor likes to call it, but we will review those films as well. We just thought it'd be something a little bit different, and like I say, we'll go from there and see what happens. So, Gregor, would you got anything you would like to say to us? Or?
Yeah, actually, I mean, despite lockdown, I've not actually been watching that much Star Trek. To be honest, there's been a lot of stuff. A lot of the arts organisations, Royal Opera House, Metropolitan Opera, Royal Ballet, they've been good enough to put a lot of free stuff. So if you're looking to culturally expand, there's been lots of really good stuff on YouTube and different channels. What I have been doing though is we've been doing Zoom stuff with SPOCK of the Week, and we did the open table one, which was great. But there's also been a lot of stuff going on all over the world, so I've joined in a few Zoom chats, I've taken part in a virtual con. Lots of the actors are doing really good stuff. Garrett and Robert Duncan and Neil are doing the Delta Flyers. So I've not been watching Star Trek as such, but I have been doing a lot of other stuff in and around Star Trek. So yeah, it's been good in that way.
I think it's been kind of ironic, really, that although we've been socially isolated from everybody, we've almost been a bit closer with the virtues of technology, because certainly the Zoom things, though we haven't been able to attend a convention this year, obviously the Comic-Con was cancelled and Vegas has been cancelled now, so they haven't happened. However, the stars have. We've been welcomed in to have Zoom chats with them. They've been really open in them, and there've been some fascinating insights from them. So it's actually worked out rather well for us in that respect.
It has done, and to be fair, even though, like I say, we've mentioned this before, possibly, I don't know, I've had drinks since the last episode, but the whole SPOCK of the Week programme, and as well as Ceti Alpha 5 as well, this all was born out of this lockdown, this whole situation. So I mean, not just us. I mean, there's a lot of audio podcasts out there that have started up since. I just did one recently with yes, you're getting name dropped again, Dan. It's happened twice with a guy called Dan Decker, called Bad Choices and Bourbon. That was a really good one, and he started that out of all this. But that's just one out of many, both Star Trek and non-Star Trek stuff that has started because of this. So, in respect, it's been a good thing in that respect. I mean, obviously there's a lot of bad with it. Take nothing away from that. It is a very serious thing, but like you say, Sarah, it has brought a lot of people together, ironically, by tearing them apart.
Yep.
And it does make it a lot, sort of brings it home, that friends and family, how much they actually mean to you. Especially, I miss my Trek family, so it's really good to be back in the presence of Gregor and Sarah. So, thank you all for joining us on our latest episode. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the first movie, and we will be talking about the motion picture. So join us in just a few moments and we'll get right at it. Okay guys, welcome back. For those of you that weren't scared off by the introductions there, we're now going to talk about the movies and where to start, but right at the very beginning. So let's start with the motion picture. Now, being the youngest of the group here, the motion picture was not something I'd seen in the early years, but when I grew up I realised what it was and found out what it was, so I watched it. So I'm going to start off with Gregor.
You'd have seen it first time round, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Yes,
I guess I'm the only one in the room that actually went to the cinema to see it on its original theatrical release. I did. My dad took me when I was 9 years old.
Oh.
It's a little bit divisive, I think, amongst the fan base, the motion picture. I think some fans love it, some don't. I think I'm somewhat indifferent to it. It certainly had a difficult birth because, once the original series was cancelled and went into syndication, it began to gather momentum, and then there was talk of bringing it back, Star Trek Phase 2, a TV series, and then Star Wars happened, and then switched to a movie, and then there was all the issues about getting Leonard Nimoy to come back with all the intellectual property rights that he'd missed out on, but eventually they managed to get him. So it didn't have the easiest of births, and I don't think the creative process that it went through did the film any favours. The people that do really like the film, I understand why they like the film, because there is a really, at the base of it, a really good science fiction story. Voyager going out and then coming back after being discovered by an alien species. We can speculate all you want as to whether it's the Borg. It's never it's never stated it's the Borg, but Voyager coming back and the philosophical debate about what it is to be human and creation and stuff like that. There is actually a really good science fiction story there, but that story was originally created for the pilot of the TV series, and then they've tried to expand it into a movie. It ended up being the most expensive movie ever made at the time, so they spent an awful lot of money on special effects to try and make Star Wars money back from the movie, because that was the fashion at the time, for these big space opera battles, and it just doesn't work for me. The overall thing, it just doesn't work. There's a reason why it's called Star Trek the Slow Motion Picture or Star Trek the Motionless Picture. There's too much filler. Yeah, the special effects are great, revolutionary at the time. I think Douglas Trumbull done a great job, but there was so much emphasis on the special effects, they forgot the script. Certainly I know Leonard Nimoy, when you hear certain interviews from him, he hated the script, and they were basically working on the script every single day, because they never actually went into the movie with a finished script, or not even one that just needed a little tweaking. They were constantly at the script. I mean, it's not without merits. There are some great scenes in it. There's some, as I said, great science fiction stuff to begin with, but it's just not that well executed for me.
Do you think it was a bit sort of rushed through to sort of try and get onto the back of the coattails of Star Wars, maybe, or? Because it was because of the Star Wars films that they decided to go with the movies, wasn't it? I mean, they thought, oh well, this is, it's back in fashion a little bit here. Let's try and, now there's a momentum for Star Trek.
I think there was a war between the studio, the director, and Gene Roddenberry in terms of what they were all looking to get from the movie. Gene Roddenberry obviously wanted to make his mark on it by trying, and I think you can see that in the foundations of the story. You can see Gene Roddenberry's footprint clearly. Then you have a director who'd won 2 Best Director Oscars and also made a science fiction classic earlier in his career with The Day the Earth Stood Still. Then went on to win Best Director Oscar for West Side Story and subsequently The Sound of Music. So a guy that clearly knew what he was doing, and a studio that wanted to make Star Wars money back from the film. I just think that was never going to be a combination that worked.
There's too many different sort of...
Too many goals, too many things wanted from the movie. Something, and this goes for TV shows or films. Sometimes when they're trying to appeal to a demographic or a commercial goal, they take their eye off the ball, because sometimes to achieve all the things that you want, you just need to make it good.
Do you think in retrospect, looking back, that it has almost sort of cult quality to it, as in the sense that because it was the first Star Trek film, and it did have its issues, that people like it for that because they love to hate it, or they love to sort of pick at it. I mean, me personally, I don't dislike the film. I do have to push myself through the opening scenes where they reveal the Enterprise. Although as impressive as that is, it does go on a little bit too long for me. But then again, personally, I think that was a good way of setting up the grandeur and the scale of Vija later on in the film. So I don't know whether that was intentional or if it was just accidental, I don't know. But personally, I don't dislike the film, but I understand where people come from when you do need to push through that initial opening to get to the good bits of the film, personally thinking.
I'm not sure whether because I'm with Greg. I think the storyline is absolutely brilliant. I think that concept is fantastic. It's very much up there with Isaac Asimov. It's a wonderful story. It's an interesting one because you kind of do wonder in later years. You think, was that the birth of the Borg? Was it the birth of the first organic species that were taken in by this entity? But for me, I'm not sure if it's the script that's let it down or if it was the accent fighting it, but there was just... I watched it and I didn't recognise the characters I'd loved in the original episodes, because where was the banter between Bones and Spock that had developed so brilliantly across those 3 series? His green-blooded inhuman, all these little barbed comments about him having high blood pressure. It was all gone. I didn't recognise Kirk with the twinkle in his eye that he always had when he was bending. He seemed so... Maybe that was the change that had happened to him because he'd become Admiral Kirk by that point and he had to take control of it. But I felt that he was missing his bit of a gleam about him, and that trilogy between the 3 of them that had developed so brilliantly across the original series was just completely lacking. Although there was an excitement when Spock came on the bridge, and there was a feeling that he had changed because of what had happened to him with the Vulcan Academy. Just didn't recognise any of these people anymore. And it comes back though in the other films. It's almost like there was this glitch, because when we go back into 2, 3 and 4, that's those people are recognised. There they are. There's that bond between them and the good humour between them and the fun and the banter, and just all felt a little bit stilted.
Do you think they sort of maybe abstracted that from the film to emphasise the sort of the somberness, what's the word I'm trying to think of now? The philosophical element of the storyline? Do you think it was maybe... I don't know, I think they were trying to take themselves too seriously. They were trying to be more highbrow about it, because when Star Trek originally aired, it was dismissed as being too cerebral. And certainly that idea is a very cerebral idea, and I think they tried to go too highbrow and they missed that bit of the fun element that's clearly there there's a few little bit tweaks in 2, certainly in 3, and most definitely in 4. That takes it to the extreme, but it's missing in just those little moments between them, because they felt like complete strangers. It was like these people have been on a 5-year mission together. And they bonded so closely, and now it seems like they're complete strangers. And I don't recognise them as their characters either. I don't recognise the emotion in them anymore. So that's where it went wrong. And whether that's down to the script writers or down to the story itself, I'm not sure, but it didn't work.
That all comes back to the script not being finished, and not having a fully prepared script before they started filming, because what happened was they were working on the script all the time and they ended up focusing on plot, and we had nothing about character in it. And when you talk about the change in Kirk, etc., I mean, obviously between the end of the original series and the film we had the novels, but visually to a viewer, that change in character, was that earned in the film? I don't think it was.
Everybody seems so dry, incredibly dry and incredibly withdrawn from each other compared to what they had been through.
I think Spock's opening scene when he walks onto the bridge after failing the coroner, and he's basically a dick to everybody. I think it's just like, that's not what I want to see as a Star Trek fan.
Well, let's look into that a little bit more. The characters in the film. I mean, you mentioned there's a difference to you compared to the dynamic they had in the TV series. Would it have not? Do you think the films they did that deliberately to sort of like separate themselves from the opera in space of Star Trek and be more Star Wars and be more Star Trek like Gene Roddenberry originally wanted to be?
Could have been where they were aiming for. I mean, certainly they've all got a history, because we've actually got a gap between the end of the original series, which was, let's face it, cut off in its prime. It didn't end particularly well, and the last episode of it is unspeakable. However, something's happened, and a lot of that has been filled in by novels that were written by numerous people. There's Flag Full of Stars, the Lost Years, so we get a little bit of background. They've all obviously been somewhere. Bones has actually left Starfleet and been brought back, because Kirk references this rule that they can actually redraft him in because of some special occasion, or because at a different time. And obviously Spock had attempted to enter the Vulcan Academy and become a proper Vulcan, rather he'd given up his human side. So maybe there is about that, and obviously Kirk had become an admiral and become a bit more desk-bound, so he's become a bit more authoritative. However, I just felt that although they'd been apart for that long, when they came back together, would they not have? And it's touched upon a little bit when Spock arrives and he completely sidebars Chekhov, because Chekhov's all, "Oh, Mr. Spock," and you can see the excitement in him, my old friend, and he's just kind of like blanked him as he walks past on his way to the bridge, and they all kind of like, "Oh, it's exciting, we're back together," and he's just kind of like, "Nah, I'm not here."
He's just gone full Vulcan, the human part.
Yeah, but it's a shame, because that was what made Star Trek good, was that ensemble cast, that relationship they had. They were a family who had been thrown together and yet had become thicker. It was like sometimes water is thicker than blood, because they'd been through so much together. And it's a shame that once they'd got back together, they didn't fall back into that same step they'd had before. And like I say, it's picked up again in 2 and certainly in 3. That bond is unbreakable. But there's just this certain sternness, and let's not get started on the uniforms, because what were they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I loved the original series uniforms.
Really good.
I think that
Technicolor
was
celebration. Let's do red, yellow, blue. Wow.
I mean, I love the whole sort of now everybody knows, even non-Star Trek fans know what
red shirt.
What a red shirt is. Yeah. Yeah, Sarah will not be making it to the end of the video, folks. We'll warn you now. Spoiler alert.
Danger.
She is wearing the red shirt. Big mistake. But I completely agree with you on the uniforms. I mean, it's like, it's just monotone greys and whites.
Pyjamas.
Yeah,
Space 1980.
It spoils it for me, because when you see Scotty for the first time and he's got the uniform on, and it's like, no, it just spoils it. I mean, one thing I will want to make is McCoy. Now, what a beard.
Fan of his beard, are you?
Yes.
Oh, funny that. A bit of
what? Yeah, I mean,
tribute to McCoy's beard.
I honestly, genuinely love the look. It just suits him. He wears it well. There's not that. I mean, I'm terrible. It's really terrible. But DeForest Kelly just really wears that beard really well, and I'm like, they should have kept it.
I don't know. I think I prefer him without the beard.
But he does. Do you agree or disagree that he rocks the beard in that film?
He did. He did look like somebody who'd been out in the wilderness and was very angry about being recalled back into Starfleet.
It did look like he just walked off a one-lot film in a religious movie and then walked onto the set of Star Trek. But he looks good in it. It's kind of like, it's the Riker debate for me, it's like with or without, I do like him with, but yeah, it's what got me a little bit later on was when Spock was doing the EVA, exploring and stuff like that, getting up to investigate and. That was the second point in the film where it sort of it dragged a little bit.
Yes, this is when they've entered the cloud that is danger, and they there was I think this.
Spock
I
was
think
a bit
they
of a
were
rebel
celebrating
on that,
special effects a bit there, weren't
Is
they?
this the scene where Spock's got to shoot through an orifice?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't sort of go down that particular Jeffrey Stewart.
These are the words that Spock uses. He has to fire at the right time to get through the orifice.
Do you think that was, I mean, today, is that just us looking at the film with today's language?
What are you talking about? That's what he says.
No, but I mean, you could just look at your face right there and you know what's going through your mind, Gregor Cameron. That's and we do see a little bit of a rebel side of Spock in the, because he's basically done that without.
Yeah. Well, is it
without, he's gone against orders. He's gone, he's done that without permission.
Is it a rebel side or is it the selfish side? Because when he boarded the Enterprise, the only sort of interesting character thing they did with Spock was that he felt this connection to V'Ger, and then nothing was going to stop him connecting with V'Ger, not his own safety or indeed the safety of the crew or the safety of the Enterprise. And that's very un-Spock-like, it's very un-Star Trek-like. But again, I think that comes back to the script not working with the characters that they had.
Do you know what I think might have happened? And I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if some of the writers that were involved in it actually hadn't watched the original series and were just presented with this story for a movie and some background information about the characters. Because if you look at what happens in Star Trek 2, which was written by Nicholas Meyer, he had actually he deliberately watched Star Trek and he picked an episode to use as the basis of it. So he had a much better understanding of what had gone before. And that's what I think is missing, is that everything that had happened before just suddenly seems to have been wiped off the slate. And it's maybe explained by there is this gap between the end of the original series 5-year mission, which we never actually see the end of because it gets cut short with Turnabout Intruder. And then we're at the movie and they've all moved on and done different things. I just feel that there's not really that recognition, and the fact that if you did come back together and your bond had been that close, it would have grown closer again. And
can we talk about the difference in the character development on screen between Star Trek 1 and Star Trek 2?
Well, we are getting very, very close to getting onto Star Trek 2, so we can basically mosey on across to that one, and that'd be a nice little sort of bridge across to it. Yeah, go for it.
Well, we've referenced in the first movie the difference between the characters at the end of the original series and the beginning of the motionless picture. Okay. Some of it will have come from the books, but the motion picture spends about 45-50 minutes of the first 45-50 minutes getting the crew together, and that was time that could have been spent on the script explaining what the crew had been up to, why they were different now, etc. But they didn't. They used that time with special effects shots, not story. You contrast that with the opening scene of The Wrath of Khan, where it's the Kobayashi Maru test and it's Kirk's birthday, and within 5 minutes of that movie you know exactly where Kirk is in his life.
The
exactly where he is in his life.
The picture is painted best. I think the downfall of it was that Star Wars was such a success with the pew 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 and the laser things that they felt they had to do that. They had the budget for it, and we've all been there. We're fans of photography. We've had Photoshop, and see when we got Photoshop and we fell down the whole rabbit hole of spot colour. That's cool. I can do it, so I should. And sometimes actually you shouldn't.
Yeah, it's just because it's there, it doesn't mean you have to do it. I mean,
and ultimately, story is way more important than any special effects.
I mean, I think, to be honest with you, just as a closing point on the first film, the fact that it sort of takes time, forget about the special effects, but it takes the time to set up the characters getting back together, I think is something that's been lost in film and television, because now you watch a film and it's like boom, and you're not the main story, like, well, hang on a minute, what's it's a bit too fast. So pacing is an issue that a lot of people do sort of comment on these days. So we'll get into the second film now, I think, and we'll be back in just a few ticks. Yeah, welcome back, guys. So the second film needs no real introduction, does it really? I mean, because let's be honest, I don't think there's a lot of people that can say a bad thing about the Wrath of Khan. What do you reckon?
Interestingly enough, this has actually come up on Marooned on Ceti Alpha 5 as being possibly the number one choice so far, next to one of the variations of the triple episodes. So that's just an interesting factoid for you there, but it does seem to be a very firm favourite. So, and certainly with me, it's a tough one to pick between 2 and 6, but 2 is certainly one that I would watch time and time again and still cry at the end.
It's definite. I mean, the story's good. The acting's good. I mean, Ricardo Montalban, is it? If I said that right?
Ricardo Montalban.
Yep. Oh, don't you send shivers down my spine just saying it like that, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, the rest of the film could have been, and it wasn't, but it could have been terrible. But Ricardo's character, Khan, and the way he played it and the way he performed and brought it to the screen, the
fact that they got the original actor back from the original episode, because the whole of the premise of this film is based on the original series episode Space Seed, which featured the exact same actor, and links those two histories together, which is fantastic because it's so far back in Kirk's history, and the whole crew who were present on the Enterprise at the time are aware of this. For them it was just one event that happened in the whole 5-year mission that they had at the time, but the fact that they got that continuity was pretty incredible.
I think that's it, and I think that's what made it. I mean, it was definitely a save from the first one. I mean, they really sort of brought the Star Trek into the cinematic world with the second. Personally, I love the beginning of the film where Chekhov is with I forget the name of the captain now, but he's not on the Enterprise.
Captain Tyrrell.
They're on the Reliant, and they come to Ceti Alpha 5. They're down there, they're looking at it, and potting around the ship and.
Which they don't think is Ceti Alpha 5.
They don't know. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, and this is what makes it a great introduction. And then, they're looking around, and he sees the name plaque for the ship, and he's going, Botany Bay, Botany, and you just see the cogs turning, and he's like,
and the colour drains, and he's like, we need to get the hell off this planet.
Yeah, we need to sort of turn tail, but it's just as they're about to go, that's when. And it just goes on from there.
And it's that reveal moment as well, where Khan starts to do the whole strip tease type thing, where you're thinking, who is this? What is this? And then slowly the mask comes off, and they're all kind of like, ooh!
I remember the first time I actually did see Wrath of Khan. I was sort of a young adolescent. I was about 10 or 11 years old when I first saw the Wrath of Khan properly, and I remember the slug. Yeah, they did that. I mean,
it's me nightmares.
Looking back at it now, I mean, you look at the CGI effects on it and stuff like that, and the graphics. And
it's clearly a plastic ear. I'll give you that.
It's clearly, it's so cheesy by today's standards, but even so, it still gives me when that thing goes in there.
I think it's the way that Khan describes it, wrapping around the cerebral cortex, and you're like, oh, this doesn't sound good. This does not sound nice at all.
It's a brilliant film. I mean, Gregor, what do you what your, because you'll have seen this one for the first time as well, I would imagine.
Not in the cinema, no. I had to wait for it to come out on VHS.
For the kids out there that don't know what a VHS is, it's like a very, very, very big memory card, okay?
I mean, it was a great film, and going back to where the studio was and the genesis of the Wrath of Khan.
No, see what he did there.
The original movie had made money, but not the money that they'd hoped for. There was obviously a lot of politicking going on, and Gene Roddenberry wasn't that involved in the Wrath of Khan. They brought in Harve Bennett, who'd been a fairly successful TV producer at the time, and through a couple of people he knew, he decided to involve Nicholas Meyer, who's now basically Star Trek royalty. And Nicholas Meyer, I don't think had ever, at that particular stage, I think he'd done a couple of TV movies. He'd written a few novels that were fairly good. I think he'd maybe done one film, but this was sort of his major feature film debut. And he'd never seen Star Trek, so him and Harve Bennett, they watched all the original series and decided that they wanted to find out what happened with Khan from the episode Space Seed. They thought that would be a great story to build a film around. And Nicholas Meyer, being the amazing storyteller that he was, coming back to Sarah's point, knew exactly what Star Trek was about. He knew it was about the triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, McCoy. You know, the logic, the humanity, and the reason. The three of them representing each one of those traits. And he built the movie around that. And yeah, what a story he put in. And you know, we're blessed these days, because when the movie came out in 1982, I didn't see the director's cut. The director's cut's only about 3 or 4 minutes longer, but there's a couple of scenes in it that make way more sense to the movie. And make it an even better film than it already is. But yeah, I mean, it's got a bit of everything. It's got character, it's got pathos, it's got adventure in it. It's absolutely brilliant.
And story is old as time as well, because I'll never forget, I was quite a collector of movie posters when I was a teenager, and this was one of the ones that I did buy, and the tagline for the movie was, "At the end of the universe lies the beginning of vengeance."
Yes.
And I just love that, and it's that really old story. This guy's been marooned on the planet for so many years, and all he has time to do is like plot revenge. He's dead set. He's lost his wife, so he's now just angry, and Kirk is the focus of his anger, and this is his. You know, he just wants to end Kirk.
But isn't the poster great? Because isn't the main character on the poster, isn't it? Khan?
He's the big poster.
And all the arms folded.
He is the middle of the poster, and it is, and his physique is also rather pleasing.
Okay, calm down.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Sorry, I just a bit hot in here again now. Yeah.
Sick bay.
Well, I mean that was the actor. That wasn't a prosthesis. That was the actor's pecs. They're very, very impressive. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, he kept fit.
I'm glad you said pecs. Yeah, this is a family show.
They were his own bits.
Okay.
And there he goes.
Yeah, but no, it's that ancient story, because there's he references it, which is actually apparently an Arabian proverb. Khan says there's a Klingon proverb that revenge is a dish best served cold, and this is very cold in space. But it's apparently a mixture of it's an Arabian proverb that revenge is a dish best served cold, because what they're referring to there is the longer you are away from it, the more time you've had to plot. And he had certainly stewed over it for many, many years.
So do you, I mean, like I say, one thing we can definitely agree on with The Wrath of Khan is that it will be, and I think will forever be, the quintessential Star Trek original series film. I mean, like I say, everybody has their own opinions, and somebody might be shouting at the screen right now saying, you know, I like this one, or I like that one. You know what? That's perfectly fine.
It's wonderful, and I think also because it has a little bit the motifs that go through it, and this is where the writing was just wonderful, because the motifs that are laid throughout it, because you have a little bit of the Moby Dick motif, which is basically Khan is Captain Ahab, and Kirk is Moby Dick. He is the whale that is being chased, and you can see that right in the final scene. You also have the Tale of Two Cities, in that Kirk, who has been the admiral for so long and he's been despondent, and you can see it in the opening scenes where he's bored, he's fed up. He wants to be gallivanting around the galaxy. And the theme from that one, from Tale of Two Cities, is the recall to life. Because that's what, if you've read the novel, the opening of that is the chap finding out that his daughter's actually still alive, and suddenly he has a reason to be alive. And in Kirk's case, he finds out his son is still alive, and that recalls him, and he suddenly becomes all action again, because you've seen he's tired, he's bored, he's fed up, and then all of a sudden he's kind of like, oh, let's do this, let's do that.
We get that old Kirk back, don't we?
And you can see, and the music also takes that when he's in the Genesis cave, and they've been kind of lounging around, and then Spock comes back and he says, right, we're ready for battle, and he just leaps up, and it's all back into action. You're like, yes, that's the Kirk, that's it, go at it, boy.
Can we just mention the soundtrack both for 1 and 2? Because 1 was Jerry Goldsmith. I know we've not been glowing about a review of the first movie, but we did get that great iconic Star Trek theme from Jerry Goldsmith. Mm-hmm. And from The Wrath of Khan, he went a completely different way with James Horner. And I thought, brilliant soundtrack to both movies.
We can have a little chit chat about the soundtracks a bit later on, if you like. So so we'll go nicely on to number 3 now. I think we'll be back in just a few ticks. Right, so on our little journey through the cinematic history of Star Trek, the original series films, we're on to number 3, which is Search for Spock. This one is a rather interesting one when you talk about, in terms of Leonard Nimoy, and his journey through the films. One of the things we didn't mention the last time was that he wouldn't do the second film unless he was killed off in the film. And it's quite interesting how he ended up directing and starring in the third one. There's a bit of a story behind that, isn't there, guys?
There is actually quite an interesting story. So originally, Leonard Nimoy only agreed to do The Wrath of Khan if they killed off the character of Spock. Now, apparently that whole idea was actually leaked to the fan base, and they had such an uproar about it, which took him to completely blindsided. So they actually agreed to do Search for Spock while they were still doing Wrath of Khan, and they found a way that's why the mechanism is in there, that he can come back at the very end of 2. He puts his catcher into McCoy, and you do kind of like, what's that all about? So apparently at a convention that was held, Gene Roddenberry's secretary let slip that although he had died at the end of Wrath of Khan, it's okay because he comes back in the next film. To which the fan base was clearly very happy. The studio executives not quite so much, because she'd let slip a massive spoiler, and they did in fact threaten to sack the secretary, but for the fact that Roddenberry was actually, one of his many affairs was with that secretary, and he stood up for her and said, no, she stays or I go. So there you have it. So there was quite a few fans had an early heads up that Spock was going to come back in some guise, and somebody nearly had their head roll over it.
And it's quite interesting. I like the idea that the whole when they left the Genesis, and it's he basically regenerated from what was left on the what landed on the planet. And it's that whole journey for him coming back, because it's like there's a very deadpan, even for a Vulcan, there's a very deadpan, Spock at the beginning of this, because it's almost like he's like out of time, if that makes any sense. Like
I think what's interesting here is that he's obviously the storyline is that his body was placed on the Genesis planet because he was torpedoed in space. His body was torpedoed. It lands on the Genesis planet during the Genesis process on the planet itself. So it regenerates all life, and including what it found of Spock's remains, but it's gone way back to the very beginning with that one. So what I think is happening here is that as it's regenerating him, because he doesn't have, although he is obviously genetically half human, half Vulcan, his mother isn't present as a force in his actual development, which is obviously accelerated by the Genesis planet, which is a slight issue which we come to later in the film.
Yeah.
So he ages much faster, but he has no human element to his kind of his regeneration, so he becomes much more Vulcan, and that's all there is. And obviously his catcher is elsewhere in the mind of a man who's now clinically insane and been put in a sanitarium because they think he's bonkers. So without that, he is just literally this logical being.
It's for me it's not. I mean, I enjoy watching the film, but it's not one of my favourites, to be honest.
It's grown to me as Gregor. It's one of your particular favourites, isn't it?
I've never quite understood the mantra that came out of the first 6 movies, that the even numbered ones were good and the odd numbered ones were bad, because I've never understood why The Search for Spock was lumped in with 1 and 5. I've never quite understood that, because I think it's better than that, and it obviously forms a middle section of what became a series of 3, a trilogy. 2, 3 and 4 is essentially, you could watch them back to back as one film. That is a trilogy of movies. But I also, I mentioned earlier, I briefly went into soundtracks earlier, and how Jerry Goldsmith gave us the iconic Star Trek theme that probably supersedes even the original series theme now when people think of Star Trek. We had a complete change of direction with James Horner's much more naval and Horatio Hornblower, Captain Hornblower type soundtrack that we had in the Wrath of Khan. And what we got from The Search for Spock, for me, is the real deep dive into what the Klingons were about. We'd had the Klingons in a couple of episodes of the original series where they were baddies and they didn't have ridge foreheads. But we had this warrior race on the bird of prey, out seeking honour. Honour it was all about the honour, and played with great gusto by Christopher Lloyd. And
yes,
absolutely brilliant. That is when I think of Klingons now. Those are that Christopher Lloyd's the first Klingon I think of. Yeah, that's a Klingon. And that's not to disrespect what William Campbell, John Kalokas, and who was the core cast Kang trio from the original series. John Kalokas, William Campbell. I can't remember the third guy.
We'll come back to it.
I'll come back to it.
Remember
but Christopher Lloyd's Kang. Was it Kang? That's the one I remember. I really think, that's a Klingon.
Yeah. And I actually love that the spine-chilling moment is they're stealing intelligence. The opening is them stealing the intelligence about Genesis, and there's the female who gets a hold of it for him, and she passes it over, and he says to her, "Did you watch it?" And she's like, "Yes." He says, "Oh, that's unfortunate. Do you know what that means?" And she's kind of like, "Yeah." And she stands. She doesn't even try to deny it or to escape in any way. She just literally stands there and like, "Well, that's us. We're going to get executed because we broke the rules." And it's that whole honour thing, and you just feel like, wow, they just literally blew up that whole. Wow, okay, they're bad. Yeah.
It's for me, I have to agree with Gregor on the whole Klingon, with Christopher Lloyd and stuff like that. To my shame, until very recently, I actually forgot Christopher Lloyd did play a Klingon. There is an interesting point that we'll get into on the next one about Christopher Lloyd that I like to think is a bit of a funny crossover connection, but we'll do that a bit later on. But yeah, it is a good film. It is a good film, but like I say, it's not one of my favourites. So
I think it's better. I've rewatched it over the years because my favourite was always 2. And then latter years 6, because I saw from 4 onwards, I actually saw them all at movies from 4 on. That showed me at my age now. But I've rewatched 3, and actually it is very good. It definitely grows on you. There's an awful lot in it, and I think the humour comes back into it a bit more as well with the when they steal the Enterprise. And there's that whole just the storyline of the fact that they would do that for a friend. And there's no questions asked. They're just kind of, because Kirk gets a visit from Sarek, and Sarek explains that obviously there hadn't been enough time for Spock to explain to anybody around them, because Scotty was incapacitated. He'd obviously put his catcher into McCoy, and once they find out, and he gets in touch with the rest of the crew, and they just drop everything. They put their jobs on the line. because they're effectively committing treason by stealing the Enterprise to go and rescue him. He tries to go through the correct channels, and they say, no, it's a no-go area, you can't, it's not happening. And then the rest of them are just kind of like, of course, you would never, it doesn't even cross their minds to say, oh, this is a bit dangerous. They're just kind of like, yeah, we're doing it because Spock's one of us.
And I think that brings back that's the tie-in for me, the human element of Star Trek, is that yes, we're more evolved as a society, as a species, but we still have that human element. It's like, well, to hell with the orders, to hell with the rules. This guy's part of family. He's our brother essentially. Let's get in there and get this guy.
And I love the little lines, like, don't call me shorty. And the whole, Uhura, where she's like, yeah, you wanted adventure, well, here you go, you can sit in the cupboard.
I think there's actually a lot of stuff that comes out of Star Trek 3 into the wider Star Trek universe. I mentioned obviously about the Klingons as we now think of the Klingon race. For a start, that was there. We see an Excelsior class for the first time. We see the space station orbiting Earth for the first time. These are all things that then, permeated its way through the wider Star Trek universe in later films and indeed the TV series. Right down to the Klingon stuff that comes back on Enterprise. It's fantastic. That's all the genesis of that is all in Star Trek 3.
It's brilliant. So we're going to move quickly on to number 4. So we'll be back in just a few ticks. Okay, so my personal favourite now, the 4th film, The Voyage Home. Yes.
Classic.
Yes. Remember where we parked it, because we will be talking about this later on as well in future episodes. It has to be, for me, the best one, because it really does encapsulate the dynamic between Spock, Kirk, Chekhov and Uhura. There's just enough comedy in the film that it brings you back to that sort of that dynamic, and I absolutely love that. I mean, as I mentioned earlier on, there was something regarding Christopher Lloyd. This is the second time in the movie world that Christopher Lloyd has lost a time machine. Technically a Klingon warbird isn't a time machine, but in this film they did indeed use it as a time machine, slingshotting around the sun. And we did discuss this in detail in a previous podcast with one of our good friends from the Earl Grey podcast. So if you want to listen to that, go back into history and have a look at some of our early ones. But yes, we're here to talk about this film. So you guys, what do we reckon? We saved the whales.
It's a fan favourite, isn't it? It's just it's a lovely, light-hearted movie. We've had 2 pretty heavy-duty ones where in 2 we saw death of a massive character. In 3 we also had a death, not a massive character, however an important character to Kirk. So 4, just from start to finish, what an absolute laugh. But trivia checkpoint. Here's some fun trivia for you. The chap in the bus incident, as we'll call it, where the punk on the bus with the very loud music, who Spock does the Vulcan pinch to, he actually reappears in a Marvel movie. He's in Spider-Man.
Oh, well, there you go, folks. So, you heard it here.
It's the exact same chap. He actually complains about somebody's loud music. He leans out of a window in Spider-Man and complains about loud music. So there you go. Just a little bit of trivia for you. But I think it's quite cool. Easter egg there, maybe. I think it was. I think it's quite a cool one.
But yeah, Gregor.
What about you?
Yeah, great fun, great movie. Leonard Nimoy obviously directed The Search for Spock, and had a little bit of the shackles on from the studio, keeping an eye on him, but The Search for Spock did okay, so off he went. And like I said, it's your show now, you go and do it, and he did, and he ran with it. And interestingly, in 1986 he was responsible for 2 of the top 10 grossing movies of the year, one being The Voyage Home, the other one being 3 Men and a Little Baby. So yeah, I mean, he was in a real purple patch creatively at that point. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's some themes in the Voyage Home. Obviously, saving the whales. There's a environmental element there in terms of everything around us. We need to survive, and etc. We need to look after the environment that we've lost. There's some great comic moments, but obviously the crew, and it's in essence the crew is they're back home but they're out of time, so they're in essence they are on an alien world. It's alien to them, everything that's going around them. And then one of the great things is the Chekhov in his Russian accent and
nuclear vessels.
You can't
beat it.
There's great stuff. And then coming back to the point I made earlier in the recording today about the expanded Star Trek universe, we see a bit more of that here because we see Admiral Cartwright, we see the President of the Federation, so they're building, at this stage Star Trek's really starting to build all these layers because we're getting pretty close to the launch of TNG in terms of Star Trek overall now in 1986. So they're building all these layers in this, enormous expanded universe that we're aware of now within Star Trek, and you can see it all building there. But yeah, it's great stuff. And actually, Nicholas Meyer was also an uncredited writer in The Voyage Home.
Okay, that's something I didn't know, so even I learn things on this show, folks. It's brilliant. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the comedy and stuff like that, and the comedy moments. I mean, my personal favourite, other than the Chekhov and the nuclear vessels, is Scotty, when he's trying to get the materials required to build the tank.
Transparent aluminium.
And he's there, and he's got the mouse in his hand, and he's going, computer. Mm-hmm. He says he's talking to it initially, and he goes, "No, try this," and he goes, "Computer," and then so maybe you should try this, and he goes, "Oh, how quaint!" And that's the amazing thing, that it's funny, but it's like he knows what to do with the keyboard. But how did he not know what to do with the mouse? It's the comedy of it that sort of saves that little moment. But it's brilliant.
Now, you see, I thought your favourite moment might have been the bit where they try and get on the bus to go to the aquarium where the whales are, and they get kicked off the bus with what is the meaning of exact change?
Something, yeah.
As a bus driver, I thought you were just might go, exactly.
To my shame, yes. It is a great moment, but I have to say that on that analysis alone, it's not my favourite moment, but it is a good moment. It's like the comedy of them getting on the bus and then it's just immediately walking like, okay, well. And it's Spock that says it. If it wouldn't have worked any other way if Spock hadn't said it.
He has some brilliant lines in the whole thing. Just fantastic. But funnily you should mention the transparent aluminium though, because the chap in that one, we've actually seen a legendary cosplay in Vegas of a chap who dressed up as the guy at the aluminium plant, the one who just quit smoking.
Well,
not now Marjorie. And do you know what? Everybody recognised him immediately. The guy just wore a shirt with a tie and a plain kind of tan cardigan and a badge saying "I quit smoking today," and was walking around with a mouse in his hand, and everybody went, "Voyage Home." Immediately recognisable, and there's such a tiny character in it though. But they still knew it. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious.
I've seen that a few times at conventions where people have, and I'd love to see that where people dress up the more lesser known characters.
Yeah, the fringe characters from the entire movie is this tiny bit part of it, but everybody immediately knew who it was.
And it stands out because everybody dresses as Kirk, everybody does Spock, but it's nice to see them. But yeah, I mean the whole storyline of how this alien ship comes back to, because it was communicating with the whales in the past, and they come to the future, and that's what sort of they're like, where are you? And it's not, I don't know if it's intentionally destroying the Earth, but it's
looking for the signal, because the probe is basically looking for a response to the signal, and because it's not finding it, it's not meaning to be destructive, but it's being destructive
in that sense.
But the really interesting thing I found with that was the point they were making, where it was like the probe is looking to communicate with intelligent life, and everybody's going, well, like that would be humans. It's like, well, actually, no. The humpback whales are intelligent life forms,
and it gets
and
me
that's
thinking.
What the probe's trying to communicate with, and everybody else is just kind of completely irrelevant. And it maybe brought home to a lot of people how important marine life actually is, because they're so much older than human life and incredibly intelligent, but we just can't communicate with them. And that's the point. The probe could, we can't. Doesn't mean they're not intelligent.
Exactly. I mean, intelligence is measured on so many different levels. I mean, communication shouldn't be. I mean, look at me. I mean, I can't communicate for love nor money, but it doesn't mean I'm not an intelligent life form.
Oh, sorry, we need to argue with that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I'm taking the fifth. I don't want to incriminate myself.
See him sitting on his hands there. It's hilarious. But yeah, it's a great film for that respect. And it's just that light-hearted. Let's have a look at ourselves. You really, even back then, we really need to look at this. But yeah, I think that was a very welcome break from serious. Strong storylines. I mean, it wasn't a bad storyline in 4, but it was a definite break away from the seriousness and the deep thought of the previous 3.
I think it had quite a serious undertone of ecological importance.
But it did it in a light-hearted way, yeah.
In a brilliant fashion, and so many quotable quotes from it. You could literally go on all day with some of the hilarious quotes that came out of that one.
I mean, there's one. I mean, to be fair, I'm actually looking at one right now. Live long and prosper, and thanks for all the fish. But yeah, we'll move nicely on to Gregor's favourite.
Shatner's effort, yes.
Yes, 5. We'll find out what God needs with a starship. We're back in 2 ticks. So yes, here we are, back again, 5. Right, I mean, I have to be honest with you right now, guys, I haven't really watched a lot of 5 and 6, so Gregor and Sarah are going to take the lead a little bit on the next 2. But I have seen the film, and it's interesting. I mean, Spock has a half-brother.
Yes, and apparently a half sister in later versions of Trek. But 5, which is the Final Frontier. Sorry, the Final Frontier. So this one is it's an interesting one. This is directed by Shatner. So we've had 2 by Leonard Nimoy, and this is now Shatner. The story was actually quite a good one. If you read the novelisation of it, it goes into a lot more detail. I think one of the unfortunate problems, which Shatner does talk about a lot in his interviews, is that they had a limited budget, they had to do a lot of reshoots, and they ran out of money. So they never quite got the film he wanted out of this, which is an unfortunate problem, because it's a very interesting question about what is God and what is your belief system. So it's fascinating, and it does see the introduction of a side to Spock that we'd never seen before, and that he has a half brother, which is at pains to point out he's a half brother called SPOCK, who is a full Vulcan.
Does this mean I can never leave?
Yeah, that's it.
You're going to cut that bit, are we?
You're self-isolating with us now.
Damn.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Okay, so
don't worry, folks. It was just something went down the wrong hole, as we say in Yorkshire.
It's a KP dry roasted peanut.
So I think 5 is much misaligned, actually. As a movie, people often try to forget it. There is the legend that the odd numbers are not as good as the even films. It's actually a good story, and there are some fabulously humorous moments in this, because we have Uhura distracting the guards on Nimbus 3 by doing the striptease in her song, which is actually Nichelle Nichols singing, by the way, and she has got an amazing voice as well as a beautiful body. And some fabulous moments where Scotty is wandering along, and he's at this point the Enterprise has been infiltrated by SPOCK, and he's starting one by one to get the crew around to his cult thinking, and Scotty is part of the resistance force, and he's going, don't worry, I know this ship like the back of my hand, as he then smashes his head into it.
I've seen that bit on...
which is absolutely legendary, and then he falls by the wayside as well. So there's some lovely moments, and I think that there's a really important one, because the final resistance is basically that same triumvirate of Kirk, Spock and McCoy, as we see attempt to convert McCoy to his way of thinking, and he brings back the memory of the death of his father, which we find out that McCoy actually euthanises his father as he's suffering from a terminal illness. And shortly after his death, they actually find a cure for the illness he was suffering from. And Cyborg wants to use that as this mechanism to bring McCoy into his
something
cult.
he wrestles with, and he plays on that. Yeah,
it's his feeling that that was that wrong moment, and then Kirk interjects with this, like, no, this is what life is about. This is, should I have turned right, and when I turned left, what if I'd done this? What if I'd done that? That's the point. Mm-hmm. And I think we see that later on, to quote a very famous Picard quote, is you can do everything correctly, commit no errors, and still be wrong, and that's not a mistake, that's human life. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it was, and Kirk kind of brings back his friend, and obviously Spock completely resists Cyber because his logic takes over with that, but they eventually move on to find this legendary Shakari planet where God is meant to inhabit, and it's all that spirit all starts to go a little bit awry with
from what I did watch of it, because it's not a film I've watched multiple times, but I have watched it at least once. And I do remember that bit, and it's the bit, unfortunately for me, and I think it's why I don't go back to the film. It's that bit that sticks with me. It's like the whole God. What does God need with us? He's supposed to be an omnipotent. Oh, I can never say that word, by the way. I do apologise. But he's a being that can be everywhere at all times, at all places. What does he need with a starship? And even though Kirk does. Sort of immediately question, like, hang on a minute, what's God want with a starship? It smacks a little bit of just, no, this is a little bit, even for Star Trek, this is a little bit too...
Well, I think they're actually revisiting an original series episode in some manner. I don't know if you remember the original series episode, Who Mourns for Adonis? Which is a very similar premise, in that they find this ancient Greek god who people stopped believing in and they lost their powers. And this is a very similar situation, in that this godlike being has been marooned on a planet because people no longer believed, and he's somehow managed to capture the mind of Cyborg and convince him, set me free. So it's more of a level of, what do you consider God to be? You had the pantheism belief of McCoy, where it's like God's actually in the detail of the rules of the universe, which is quite a Richard Feynman kind of belief system as well. A earthbound physicist who's sadly no longer with us. But I think it's about the concept, about what do your belief is. What do you think, dear?
Oh, you're letting him speak. Well, that's
thank you for that. Let's not pretend Star Trek V: The Final Frontier is never going to go down as a classic.
No.
In the movie franchise. And if you've ever read the book that was written by William Shatner's daughter about the making of the movie, it does throw a different light on the movie in terms of what he was trying to achieve and what was actually produced finally and what was executed. There is a gem of an idea in there, it's not that well executed. I saw the movie in the theatre years ago. I thought, well, it was okay, but it certainly wasn't great. But I think now, through time, if you're a Star Trek fan and you watch Star Trek V now, it does have a place in your heart, because it's become one of those things where, it's not a classic, there's a lot of mistakes in it, it's not great, but there is a lot of fun in it. And it's like a lot of the episodes that are bad, you actually enjoy the bad episodes. You enjoy the fact that they've aimed for the bullseye and they've completely missed it, but they're still fun. And watching the for want of a better phrase, the so bad it's good aspect of it. You're never going to put Star Trek 5 out there as a film that a non-Trek fan should watch to get them into the franchise.
I think it would put them off more than...
If you're a Star Trek fan, there's enough in there. It's never going to be your favourite film, but there's enough in there where you watch it and go, oh god, it's really bad, but I still quite enjoy it.
It took all the fun elements of 4 and it took them forward, because you got the where Chekhov and Sulu were lost in the wilderness and they won't admit they're lost, because that's what men do. They don't admit they're lost. They won't ask for directions, and Uhura's kind of wise to them. They're doing the whole fake, ooh, look at this, ooh, storm coming, storm, and Uhura's like, guys, I've got your coordinates, I'm just going to beam you aboard for goodness sakes, you know.
It's like, calm down.
She's got the wind of them, and she's like, she's I'm not going to blow your story here, but I figured out that you're completely lost, you have no idea what's going on. And then Kirk climbing the mountain because it's there, and Spock just not understanding the toasted marshmallows around the campfire. We got that camaraderie back, we got that fantastic gelling of the characters back again, and there were some fabulous fun elements. It's just it is one that just missed the mark, and it's unfortunate, because if you hear Shatner speak about it, he had so many fantastic ideas for it. They just didn't have the budget. The reshoots cost them a lot of money, and in the end he's not actually as proud of that product as he could have been, and a lot of that is just due to the fact that they had deadlines they couldn't meet. And but I actually there's a lot of gems in it. It's interesting, and the concept of it is very interesting, but it's just doesn't get brought to the screen quite as easily.
So you think possibly my not dislike of it, but my lack of interest in it, do you think that could possibly be because of the budget, you know, because he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do with the story? Do you think it could have been do you think it could have been better had he been given an open checkbook and said, right, do your film? Do what you want to do. Would it have been a better film?
It could have been a better film. It could have been better writing, bigger budget, different director. There's any number of things that could have made it a better film. But in terms of your personal experience, if you go into it looking for a classic Star Trek movie, that's not what you're going to get.
So if I watch it with a different
by now it is the 5th movie, so we're getting into a lot of films. You don't go into every episode of Star Trek expecting it to be the best of both worlds, or City on the Edge of Forever.
Pun not intended.
You really don't. You don't expect every episode to be a classic, and along the way you get some stinkers, but you still enjoy them in and of themselves because they're part of Star Trek. And Star Trek 5 for me is a movie that falls into that category. It's a threshold. It's a masks. It's it's a terrible.
But it's not as bad as Code of Honor.
Okay, well that is a different discussion for a different time, I believe, and that'd be a good point to move nicely and swiftly on to the final full original series movie, number 6. We'll be back in a little tick. Guys, Undiscovered Country.
Yeah.
Now we were talking off camera, and you, Sarah, believe this is the Star Trek film.
This is one where I struggle to pick a favourite Star Trek film between 2 and 6. Interestingly enough, both of them involve Nicholas Meyer as a writer, so maybe that's why he's that good. But yeah, Undiscovered Country wraps up so many things rather beautifully. It's fantastic. The motif throughout this one, as Nicholas Meyer seems to bring motifs, is in The Wrath of Khan he had Moby Dick and Tale of Two Cities. In this one it seems to be Hamlet and the Undiscovered Country, which is a kind of a motif that runs through it in terms of the pact that they're trying to form with the Klingons, as well as the comfort level that they have with the idea of doing that. It's a huge change for everybody, and the fact that Kirk, who is so, shall we say, anti-Klingon, and also Scotty, are the ones to try and actually broker peace between them, is an interesting place to go to.
I agree. I mean, it certainly makes for an interesting film when the people with the biggest prejudice are the ones that are there to sort of broker the peace. I mean, it's a film I haven't watched for a long time, and again, speaking to you off camera, I want to go back and watch it again because
Totally should. It's a wonderful, and I actually also love the finale of it, which, spoiler alert, but at the very end of it, I mean, I'm skipping a huge amount of content here, but just that my favourite moment at the very end of it, when everything's been sorted and everybody's they're happy and they're all back on the Enterprise and everybody's back together, and then Uhura says, "Oh, we've just had a communication from Starfleet. We're to report for a decommissioning," and obviously that's like what
to the eye moment there.
Yeah, like it's over, it's all done, and obviously the Next Generation was in full swing at this point, so we'd already handed over the baton. And it was quite an emotional moment, but then they turned to Spock, and his words are, "If I were human, my response would be, go to hell. If I were human." And it's just that little interjection there, and then it pans back to Kirk, and he turns to Chekhov, because Sulu's obviously now on his own command, he's captain in his own right, and he says, "Second star to the right, and straight on till morning." Which, for those, is a Peter Pan reference for the boy who never grew up, which is exactly how I think of Kirk as the boy who never grew up. And they just go
of Kirk, yeah.
In this just this endless, they just disappear into the sunset with the starship, and I just think, yeah, that's him. He was that boy who's just gallivanting around the galaxy for the rest of his life. That's how I remember him, and it's a beautiful ending, and it's a beautiful handing over of the baton as well as the end that. And then he does this piece to camera at the very end as the credits roll, and he's kind of like, well, there's a new generation will take over the Enterprise and things will move on, and it's beautifully done. It's fantastic. Yeah. What do you think, Dave?
Oh,
back at Star Trek being at the very top of its game with this film. We've got Nicholas Meyer at the helm again in the director's chair. He co-wrote the film with Denny Martin Flynn, and right from the off, it's just fantastic. From Cliff Howdelman's hugely underrated score, the opening piece, or the opening theme, inspired by Gustav Holst's The Planets, the explosion right after that of the Klingon moon Praxis, which was a metaphor for Chernobyl, and that led to the collapse of the Soviet Empire. So the whole story itself is a metaphor for the collapse of the Soviet Empire, tapping back into that original series concept of the Klingons being the Russians. That's great, and you've got Kirk reconciling his prejudice with the Klingons because of the death of his son, his own prejudice, the great popular reference that they make at the time about Nixon being the only guy that could go to China in the film. Back to the expanded universe, you've got Admiral Cartwright back in it. So it's fantastic the way it's just built all up on that. You've got some fantastic scenes when, after the assassination of the Klingon Chancellor, when McCoy and Kirk are arrested and end up on the prison planet, and then you've got David Bowie's wife Iman turning up as a character called Marta, who helps them escape, who turns out to double cross them, who's a shapeshifter. It's just, you've got Kim Cattrall in her pre-Sex and the City days, who plays a character called Valaris, but was initially Nicholas Meyer's concept of that character was going to be Savick, which would have been a great square in the circle of Savick's storyline, but would have meant neither Robin Curtis or Kirstie Alley were available to play the character, and Nicholas Meyer said we can't have a third actress playing this character, so they renamed her Valaris. But I think that would have made the film even better. The Spock Savick relationship and the betrayal would have made the film even better. And of course, as Sarah's spoken about the end of it, it's just fantastic. It's Star Trek really back in top form, and let's not underestimate the impact that Star Trek has had on popular culture. The biggest movie franchise in the world at the moment is Marvel. And Star Trek 6 finishes with the main cast all signing off to the theme tune across the screen. You see their signatures appearing, same as you do in Endgame.
It's a wonderful,
And Kevin
brilliant,
Feige, Kevin Feige has said Star Trek 6 was where he got the idea for that. He's also said that Star Trek 6 is where he, the Next Generation, the best, no,
Use your words.
best, not the best of both worlds. All good things from the Next Generation. The triple time line story in that was the inspiration for the basis of the story that he wrote, that they came up with for Avengers Endgame. So yeah, I mean, what a cultural impact to have. That, you know, somebody like Kevin Feige takes it and runs with it.
I mean,
it's amazing.
There's a lot of influence. I mean, that's something we can talk about in the future, is how much influence Star Trek has had on other films and the film industry and life in general and our lives in general, you know, so that's a whole... but yeah, I mean, for me, it's a great ending, you know, for the crew of the Enterprise. I mean, as for what was needed was a handing over of the baton. As you say, TNG was fully in swing, but they needed to hand over, you know, the reins, so to speak, and they do that in Generations, which we'll speak about in the future. But yeah, I mean, this one for me, it's been a while since I've seen it.
Gotta watch it again.
But yeah, and it's the first time we hear the name Worf as well, isn't it?
Yes, his ancestor features as a defence attorney, if there is such a thing, in the Klingon trial of Kirk and
it's actually Michael Dorn that
yes,
plays it, isn't
it's
it?
Michael Dorn plays it, and he is actually playing an ancestor because they'd already got Worf on the bridge of the new Enterprise in TNG, so there was the link there, and it's an interesting one. But I also love the fact that there's still the humour in it as well, because even when they're on trial and they kind of say, you know, what's your current status to McCoy, they're like, apart from a touch of arthritis, and you know, he's still got it, even though he's facing this horrific moment, he's still got his humour there and there's a lovely scene as well where they're playing detective back on the Enterprise, trying to solve what really happened, because they're obviously framed for the death of the Chancellor Gorkon, which they didn't do, and they're trying to figure out, well, what really happened. We've got a full complement of torpedoes, but the database says we fired, so what happened? And Chekhov chases back the moon boots, and he's kind of like, right, I've found the moon boots that we used to go across,
old Russian fairy tale.
No, the ones who executed the Chancellor, he's found the boots, but he then talks about this old Russian fairy tale which says if the shoe fits, and then there's this moment where Uhura's kind of like, oh, for God's sakes, and they're all going, check out, and they look down and the aliens' feet, these webbed feet, so for a conventional kind of humanoid feet, and they're all kind of like, oh right, okay, oops, unfortunate. And he's obviously referencing Cinderella, but it comes back to the original series where everything came from Mother Russia. You know, so it's still there. So it's fantastic, and yeah, it hands it over quite beautifully at the very end, as Greg has already mentioned, that sign off.
It's a great sign off. It is a great sign off.
It's a beautiful ending, and the way that they leave, they don't just get retired or decommissioned. You know, you'd like to imagine that they just run away with the ship and have more adventures and go into space. Yeah, so when he just, it's that final line where he's like, second star to the right, straight
it's a bittersweet moment, isn't it? It really is.
It's
I mean, we'll be back in just a few ticks, guys, so don't go away. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this whirlwind tour of the movies of the original series. If you would like to see a deep dive into some of the films, we'd be happy to do that, so please get in touch with us and let us know which films you would like to see us go into more detail with. In the next episode we will be looking at the Next Generation films, so please join us then, and thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, congratulations to our 4 followers that watch us every week. Brilliant, good to see you back, and tell your friends we want more.
3 of them are here.
Yes, that's the sad reality of it is that we're 3 of the subscribers. But yeah, guys, our Twitter handles are up on screen as we speak. Sarah does not wish to be named because she gets up to so much stuff on Twitter, she doesn't want to be liable for it. So check out myself at Alba Android and Gregor at Crabbit Ginger, and also follow us at SPOCK Week at SPOCK Week. For those of you who are new to this YouTube channel and new to Star Trek or new to Starfleet and you've never heard of the fan club, by all means check out sfi.org, and if you want to know a bit more about our ship, the USS Alba, check out www.ussalba.com. Okay, so just remains for us to say
Live long and
prosper, and thank you for all the fish.
Kapla!
Kapla.
Kapla. That was promised blood wine!
I drank all the blood wine, I'm sorry.
Oop.